Hello, everyone. Welcome to our weekly garden and pest webinar series with the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. My name is David Rodriguez. I'm the horticulturalist in Bexar County, San Antonio, and the Extension Service is the educational arm of the Land Grant University, supporting the 254 counties in our great state of Texas. Being the educational arm of the oldest institute of public education, we are funded separately from the university in the Texas A&M system. So our talk today is a tropical escape with Texas Superstar plants. There's my email address that you can see there, and we'll show you at the end of this presentation. Please don't hesitate if you have any gardening or landscape questions to send me an email. If you need something identified, do not put it as part of the email, but as a separate attachment with good quality images. So since we said that we're going to cover Texas Superstar plants, only a portion of the plants that we're covering today are Texas Superstar plants. And each slide that's a Texas Superstar plant will have the little Texas Superstar symbol on the bottom left corner of the slide. A little bit about the Texas Superstar plant program. San Antonio has always been the hub of the state for new plant releases. So we have about 94 plants that are part of the Texas Superstar plant program, both native, starting with the Texas bluebonnet, and other well-adapted plant species. Most of the plants in the Texas Superstar program are predominantly perennial type plants, but there are a few annuals, a few fruit, a few vegetable, and a few shade trees. So let's go on with our talk today. So a little bit of the guidelines overall for plant material, which will encompass most of the plants that we'll talk about today. So let's review some of these. The major planting season for most plants is in spring, when most of the nurseries have the deepest and best selection, to early summer. So May is a great time that you want to get a lot of these plants purchased and planted before it gets too hot in July and August. Fall is for planting, but you're limited on finding some plants at that time. But that's an excellent time because most of us have very mild winters, so you should have ample time to establish plants before winter time. Blooming doesn't necessarily mean it's better, so get a plant that's nice and healthy. Work with a Texas certified nursery professional at your favorite independent nursery to help you kind of select the right plant. So, location, location, location. Does this plant belong in full sun? Does it need shade? And when the tag says sun, will it take that late afternoon hot summer intense sun of July and August? So kind of plan, and figure out before you purchase and properly place in your landscape the right plant in the right location. Know the size of the plant. How tall is it eventually potentially going to get? The width, the spacing for ample sunlight, air circulation so you can cut down the possibility of any insect or disease pressure, and maintenance. When do I need to prune? The ideal times to fertilize, mulch, etc. We have to use the native soil that we have. Pretty much the north corridor from San Antonio up to Dallas is predominantly blackland clay. Some of us have predominant rock with parent material being limestone, caliche. Some of us are in sand pockets. So it's very important to know the type of soil that you have and try your best to work with the native soil or amend the soil with high finished, finely screened compost incorporated with the native soil. Or if you're really in a rocky area, sometimes you have to elevate and bring in a desired landscape mix as well. As a rule of thumb, when you plant in the landscape, you want to dig a hole twice as wide or wider than the container that it's in, and carefully tamp the container. Gently remove the plant from the container without pulling hard on the trunk and disturbing that root system, and possibly plant it about an inch or so above grade. So we don't want the plant to settle, and most plants are planted too deep and covered with excess soil and mulch, which can rot the base of the plant and eventually kill it. Let's look at the roots of plants. Carefully examine the roots. Are they white? Do they look nice and healthy? Or is it a big mass of bounded roots girdled? Do we need to massage and loosen up that root ball? Get a utility knife or a sharp blade and go an X on both sides of the root ball, which will help rejuvenate that root system. So going into the summer heat, when we water, that water is getting into those new roots and not just washing away and not being efficient and stressing that plant even more. We don't really fertilize new plantings, but if you get a bottle, a gallon of root stimulator, that will help activate the soil, help the plant to minimize transplant shock, and help establish it going into the summer heat. Use it as like any product, what's recommended on the label until you finish that bottle. Since most of us lack organic material, both in the soil profile, long term, we want to build the organic material in our landscapes. So mulch, mulch, mulch twice a year in early May or the month of May going in before the summer heat, and coming out of the summer heat in September, a thin 2-inch layer of a good organic mulch. My favorite, which is a natural resource in our backyard here, is double shredded hardwood mulch. Twice a year, 2-inch layer, a minimum of 2 inches away from the crown of the plant, as we don't want to put any excess soil or mulch up on the crown of any plant. As a good rule of thumb, we don't fertilize new plantings. We wait to the first major season of fertility, and that's usually late February to kick off spring, and around late August to coming out of the summer heat and to stabilize the plants and harden them off and establish them even better before winter time. We recommend a 4:1:2 or a 3:1:2 analysis or ratio for many years, such as a 1959 premium slow release fertilizer as recommended on the label. And that's the formulation that you would use for any landscape type of a plant. Vegetable garden, your lawn in springtime, typically mid April to early May. So it's a all-purpose type of a 1959 fertilizer. A lot of these plants that we'll talk about, you can also consider quite a few of them in containers on the patio. So follow the same guidelines as sun, shade, appropriate size container for drainage. When you upgrade plants from the nursery container that it was purchased in, or even plants that you upgrade on the patio, don't jump too quickly into a big container. Just move it up a couple sizes wider in diameter, get it established, root it in over time, and then upgrade it. But don't jump from a very small container into a much larger container. Use a premium potting mix, not a soil, but a potting mix. Most of those are peat-based mix, and you can cut those with a 20% high-grade finished compost as well. Always watch your watering, particularly in the summer heat. Maybe some of these plants, like other plants on your patio, particularly when about mid-June to about mid-September, with the late afternoon sun being so intense from 2 to 6, maybe we can move them into a shady area if that's possible. Fertilize in early March, early June, and early September with a slow release pelletized or prilled container fertilizer, be it Osmocote or something comparable like that. And throughout the major season, and particularly when plants are blooming, use a combination of different types of water soluble formulations of fertilizer as a supplement once a week throughout the major growing and blooming seasons. So that's a little bit of general maintenance 101. Very similar to other plants that we've discussed in the past. So it's a very simple formula, you might say, to cover both on your landscape plants as well as your container plants. And if you really look at a recipe and all that, it's just a few major key items instead of a big list of things that you're not needing to have success in your patio and in your landscape. So let's start with our topic today, a tropical escape with Texas superstar plants. Coming up with this topic, there's so many plants to consider that will kind of blend into that tropical escape to have, particularly in the summer months when we're barbecuing, having family over. It's hot out there. So I try to pick the best plants, and many of them being Texas superstar plants, as well as other plants that have proven the test of time. So even if you don't have a swimming pool, tropical escape to me in a landscape starts out with palm trees. So let's talk about a few selections of palms that I really like to consider using. One would be a windmill palm. Windmill palm is a straight upright palm. It's very small to scale. They only get about 8 to 12 feet tall, straight upright growth to it. This windmill palm has new gold lantana planted underneath it. Very nice and attractive. Now, there's much larger species of upright palms, particularly the Washingtonia selections, both the Mexican fan palm and the California fan palm. So those get very big, 30 feet plus. So make sure if you go with something that will get potentially that large to plant to scale and the appropriate size in your landscape. But windmill palm is a good sized palm, 8 to 12 feet, that most of us can consider placing either in the container or a permanent landscape plant as well. This is one of my favorite palms. It's more of a bush type palm. Some people refer to it as European or Mediterranean fan palm, and it has multiple trunks. And a lot of times you have a larger trunk than the medium and a small one. They're bush type palms, so you can let the bottom be very bushy, or like these 3 or 4 trunks that we see in this image have been trimmed out and skirted up. So you can either have full bush appearance or select your major trunks and trim out the lower growth. So that option's up to you. They get about 10 feet tall, particularly the tallest one, and then they're tiered down of 6 feet, 4 feet, etc. So it gives that multi-trunk effect of that growth habit, again, as a standalone plant in the landscape or a large container on the patio. The other plant, which is used quite a bit, are sago palms. Really, sago palm is really not a true palm. It's a cycad, but these are very popular. If you look at a lot of these sago palms that are out there, a lot of them are trimmed up as this fan palm here, kind of like single trunks. But in reality, sago palms are happiest when they have the fronds from the very top to the very bottom. That's really how they should be grown as a big, thick bush. So we don't really recommend trimming the bottom ones off that much, but a lot of people like that desired look. Again, does by itself stand alone in a container on the patio or around swimming pools or in the landscape by itself. And it really gives you that unique, beautiful tropical-like look. Now, again, there's many types of palms that you can consider, all different sizes in and around your landscape. But these are the 3 that I picked since we have so many other plants to talk about. So I put a category here of plants, semi-shade plants, kind of the green leaf plants. They're really not going to bloom that much, if at all, but it's more for that green. Now, when we typically refer to semi-shade plants, we refer to plants that get all-day filtered light, or possibly plants that just get early morning sun and shade in the afternoon, particularly on those hot sunny days that will burn the leaves. So early morning sun, all-day filtered light is what we're talking about on these next plants that we selected for y'all to consider, or you might have in your landscape at this time. This is a real cool plant, very winter hardy. You got the palms in the background of it, and your a big palm-like split leaf philodendrons are awesome. Unique tropical type plant, both as a landscape plant or on in a large container on the patio. And they're quite winter hardy. If we get an extreme hard freeze, you might lose some of the top growth on it, but normally it comes back when it warms up the following spring. So, and the older the plant, and if it doesn't freeze back and it's grown happily through proper irrigation and proper nutrition, you can have huge leaves to these split leaf philodendrons, and it really will give you that unique tropical look with early morning sun or all day filter light in your landscape. So they get pretty big. Well established plants can get a good at least 6 feet tall in the same width. So again, we have to know these plants, how big they grow, and so we don't overcrowd our landscapes. A lot of times we make problems when it comes to insects or disease because we don't water correctly. We over irrigate often, and if we have poor air circulation and not the right amount of sunlight, all that brings in problems like disease, insects, spider mites, other ferns. There's so many different ferns out there to consider. One of my favorite is hollyleaf fern. Again, it has that tropical foliage, very shiny foliage similar to the split leaf philodendron. They don't get as large. They love the shade or filter light. Probably 2 feet tall and the same width, maybe a little bit wider, and it has a unique holly leaf shape to it. But again, there's many different types of ferns to consider in a landscape situation that kind of give you that semi-tropical to tropical look in the landscape. This type of fern's been around a long time, and there's many types of asparagus fern. There's three, four, five major types. This is just a regular Springerii asparagus fern, but there's a lot of cool ones. You can grow it as a standalone plant on the patio in a nice container, hang them in a hanging basket, or put them in an appropriate place in the landscape with early morning sun or all day filter light. So this is an easy plant to grow. If you grow it in a big container, you do need to split it every third or fourth year because it grows so rapidly. And then when you split it or divide it, you can have more plants for more containers or reset them in the bed in the landscape. Cast iron plant, the plant in the foreground with the upright growth to it, almost sword-like appearance, is a great plant for shady areas. Some people even use this as an interior plant or just a standalone plant on the patio in a container. So it likes to filter light like we see in this situation. It's just green, but it's a very nice upright growth, very hardy, and a very nice plant to consider in a landscape situation. It gives you that greenery, tropical like appearance to it as well. I put the next two slides are kind of landscape type shrubs, evergreen types, you might say. In a shadier area or area that gets morning sun, Dwarf Pittosporum has been around for many years. It typically makes a natural mushroom shape, so you do very, very little to no pruning on this evergreen type shrub. And they get 3 by 3 or 4 by 4 at the most. So spacing is very, very important on this type of a plant. Its next real close related cousin is the dwarf Yaupon holly, a much smaller leaf than the dwarf Pittosporum, not as shiny or glossy as the dwarf Pittosporum, and a little bit more versatile. Dwarf Yaupon holly will also take full sun to a semi-shady location, and the best one to look for in the market that makes that mushroom shape with very little pruning at all would be one referred to as Stokes. That's the cultivar that's out there. Dwarf Yaupon holly Stokes. So we can have less maintenance by doing less pruning overall if we look for the right variety or cultivar. So look for Stokes, dwarf Yaupon holly. Makes a real nice foundation shrub for a low growing type of a shrub as well. So our next category of plants for the tropical appearance to consider are semi-shade plants, but more blooming plants. Again, semi-shade ideally means early morning sun or all-day filtered light, especially shade past 2 o'clock when June, July, and August sun is very, very extreme out there. Again, most of these plants will grow well in containers or stand alone in the landscape by one plant or multiple, 3, 5, 7 plant in a group. So one of my favorites, particularly for hummingbirds migrating south in the fall time, is your Brazilian firespike. There's a purple strain, but the red is probably the easiest to find and hardiest. Blooms these spikes with tubular red flowers, and in the morning has a sweet nectar. So both the hummingbirds in the fall that are migrating and other pollinators, like butterflies, will love that sweet nectar on it. Some people call this the Texas hosta or Texas plantain lily. It's very difficult here to grow hostas because the unique nighttime temperatures that we have, and as well as snails, slugs, and pill bugs. But this is colloquially we call it Texas hosta or plantain lily as well. Very large, shiny foliage to it. The plant typically grows around 4 feet tall about 3 to 4 feet wide. It's a tender plant if we have a hard freeze, but if it's in a microclimate, semi-protected, it comes back after you prune out any dead debris the following spring. Again, a landscape plant by itself or an excellent plant in a shadier location on the patio. It pretty much only blooms in the fall, but the leaves are very shiny and glossy. So if you put it in a large container, you can put seasonal color on the base of the container until it blooms in the fall time. Turkscap is many selections of Turkscap. So this is the first Texas superstar plant that we're highlighting today. The red one, some people refer to as fireman's cap, and that's the one that's really most available. But I put this slide of the pink one, which I think is so pretty. Pampier's pink Turkscap, very beautiful, very upright Turkscap flower. Many of them droop down. Very beautiful color, very unusual color. Likes the shade, but it'll take a good amount of morning sun. Very deer resistant. Butterflies and hummingbirds like the flowers as well. It's in the hibiscus family, mallow family, Malvaceae family. So uniquely different, an excellent Texas superstar plant. So if you want to read more and learn more about the specifics of this and other plants of the Texas Superstar Plant Program, please go to Aggie Horticulture and or plantanswers.com, where we have a lot of the information on Texas Superstar plants as well. Another great, very beautiful tropical looking plant and quite winter hardy here. Does well in a container. Some people call it cinnamon jatropha. Beautiful red flowers, very glossy, shiny foliage to them. Is a firecracker jatropha. Likes the shade or morning sun. A compact type plant that typically grows about 4 up to 6 feet tall. And you get an array of these dainty little red flowers on top of the bloom that are very noticeable from mid to late spring to the first frost. So like many Texas superstar plants, the biggest selection criteria is blooms, blooms, blooms for a long period of time, very aesthetically pleasing, as well as the benefits of pollinators and other good things like that. So this is why we designated the Firecracker Jatropha as a Texas superstar plant, and very beautiful reddish flowers and glossy, shiny foliage to it as well. Texas Columbine, the state flower of Colorado is Columbine, but our selection is a Hinkley from the Big Bend country in West Texas. So this is where Texas gold originated from. It's in the ranunculus family, has a very beautiful, unique foliage to it. And kicking off spring, going into the summer months, you have this yellow star-like flower. So a lot of people try to sell and buy columbines here in the springtime, but our heat intensity, particularly at nighttime temperatures, are so extreme that most of those are treated like annuals and die off rapidly. This is a true perennial that should come back from the crown and or reseed in the bed. They really do best in an area under a deciduous tree, such as a red oak that loses its leaves in the fall time. So the plant initiates growth in the winter time, and then we'll have the flowers to kick off spring right about the time when those trees leaf out. So it does need that protected shade and the correct placement, but very hardy, unique flowers, as you can see, this bed in full bloom, and that stargazing Texas superstar flower that it has with that beautiful gold color on it as well. Mexican petunias, we've designated the dwarf compact types over the upright ones that tend to be a little bit obnoxious in the landscape when the seeds pop out. The dwarf selections, which you can see the beautiful purple to the left, and the pink one, which they call chichi, on the right, they're very small, very complex, compact plants that bloom a long, long period of time from mid to spring to the summer up to the first frost. Can be grown in a container on the patio, but I think they really do best as an established landscape border plant that only grows about 2 feet tall. And really, they can take full sun, particularly in the springtime. But like most plants, if you give them that late afternoon shade in the summertime, they tend to be a little bit more happier. There is a white selection, Blanca, which is not as winter hardy as both the blue, purple one and the pink one. But this is a reliable plant, very compact, blooms a long period of time through most of the season, and a great plant to consider into your landscape. The next two plants are annuals, seasonal annuals, particularly going through the summer months, mid spring, planting them now, no later than the month of May or early June, is Impatiens. So we talked about kind of a lot of greenery plants in the shadier areas. So if they're larger specimens, either in a container, a large container, or in the landscape, maybe you want some seasonal color. Impatiens have really made the test of time for the shade. Cora vinca, particularly the XDR Cora vinca, looks very similar to Impatiens, but for the summer annual, we keep the Cora vinca more in the sun and Impatiens more in the shade to give you that color. So seasonal annuals, a little bit more bed preparation, maybe a good mulch and keeping them well watered and well fertilized so you can have a healthy green plant with an abundance of blooms throughout the season of summer. And particularly, they might be cut back a little bit in mid August so you can even have more blooms in the fall going into the first frost. A leafy type plant that we really consider as an annual, we really don't really consider it coming back year in and year out reliably in containers or in the landscape are caladiums. You have such an assortment of leaf colors with caladiums, and this is a bulb. Basically, you buy bulbs when they're available in February, March. You plant them in early April, or you can plant plants at this time. And again, a different array. They're really for the shade or morning sun or all day filter light. There are some selections of caladiums that have come out of Florida that they call strap leaf caladiums. It has more of a narrow leaf to it, maybe more of a serrated leaf to it, and some people refer to them as sun caladiums. But Florida is a different climate, and the intensity is way different here in Central South Texas. So the sun caladiums really will fry up in our July and August heat past 2 o'clock. So you can grow them, but grow them the same as these regular caladiums with morning sun, late afternoon shade, mulch them, good water, good fertility program. And then if you have problems with snails, pill bugs, roly polies, you probably have to put some bug baits out there if they start chomping down on the leaves like you would do any other annual like impatiens, begonias, or other plant similar to that. Our next category of tropical plants to add to your landscape for the summer months, particularly, are full sun plants, blooming plants. So we have a combination. So the biggest challenge that you have is really knowing the amount of space that you have, the sunlight, the proper bed preparation, building up the organic material with mulch, and really putting a combination of perennials, a few annuals, permanent fixtures, bigger plants as well. So we really have to plan this out so we have the best plant in the right location. So we have an array of color for the most of the months, especially the summer months throughout the year. So we'll go back to, we've showed this in a couple of our presentations in the past. Our dinner plate type hibiscus, hardy perennial hibiscus, really will take the full sun or at least a good amount of morning sun till about midday. Large flowers to them, a lot of color during spring, summer, early fall up to the first frost. You can grow them on containers in the patio, but really they do best as a landscape permanent plant that comes back year in and year out, freezes back and should come back reliably. They'll follow in spring for many years to come. You can see the Flare series by Dr. McFadden, who bred this series, one of the best hibiscus breeders in the world. Comes in an array of different colors. We can see 3, 4, 5 different colors right here. And I put this plant in there in the background. It's a variegated tapioca. They don't really bloom, but it has a unique foliage to it, very tropical in appearance, either standalone by itself on a container, a beautiful decorative container on your patio, or in the landscape. And this will take full sun. As a general rule of thumb, most plants that have a variegated leaf to it will take more sun than in the shade because they tend to revert back to the green color as a genetic sport. So gets about 4 or 5 feet tall, the same width. You got some XDR Coravinca plant in front of them, and it loves the heat. A little bit tender if we have a uniquely cold winter, so you might have to protect it if we have a hard winter, or if it's on a container in the patio, move it into an area that's protected. But it's different, very tropical like, and that's not the same tapioca that we can make the pudding out of. It's just more of an ornamental selection, but very uniquely different and been designated as a Texas superstar plant as well. I put a couple vines in here. One of them that was designated as a Texas superstar plant, a vine, a few years back, is your yellow butterfly vine. So you can see the yellow dainty cluster of blooms that bloom most of the year, particularly during the warmer days of spring, summer, and early fall. Then underneath that, they form into those pods, that lime green color pod that looks like a little butterfly. That's why we call it butterfly vine. And then those pods turn brown, and some people even do arts and crafts with those pods when they turn brown and paint them and use them as Christmas ornaments and things like that, arts and crafts. Being a vine, you need an upright structure, a trellis, a lattice, a fence to kind of help it go up it, to cling to it. But this is an awesome plant, a very fast grower, and lots of attractive flowers, as well as the unique butterfly capsule that it has on it. So here's a big specimen, a lot of flowers, a lot of seed pods, butterfly seed pods on it of yellow butterfly vine at the botanical garden. So, these are those plants that when it's so hot in July and August, they're just blooming and blooming and blooming, and that's why it was designated as a Texas superstar plant and a good vine to consider as well. The next is a category of full sun plants that have that tropical look, but get you a lot of blooms, but they're tender. And that's very important because these next plants are wonderful. We use them quite a bit, but they are going to be the winter, they're not going to be that winter hardy. So most of them will probably be best grown in large containers on the patio and brought in or really protected during those unique freezes. Or if you have a designated area in the landscape and you can protect it, and mild winters, they come back when it warms up the following spring after you cut them back, fertilize them, and mulch them. Otherwise, some of these plants as permanent plants in the landscape, if they do freeze back and die, and you get a few good years out of them, you just replace them. So bougainvilleas are an awesome vine-like type plants that you can grow different selections. Dwarf, and many of them are in hanging baskets, in containers. But in order to get you lots of unique colors, and they come in so many different colors, from red to pink, the purples tend to bloom the best in fall and winter time. And they have the leaves that you see are modified leaves on bougainvilleas that we refer to as bracts, similar to the colored leaves of modified bracts as we see on the Christmas flower poinsettias during the Christmas holiday season. But they're kind of vine-like in appearance, so sometimes they need something to kind of not necessarily attached to, but kind of cling to, or kind of be kind of grown against to give you that semi cascading drooping effect. So they bloom very beautiful. They love the hot sun, and the bougainvilleas are a win. And there's so many different colors to consider to plant out there as well. Much tender plant, and probably be best to grow this as a plant on the patio that gets late afternoon shade in July and August, is Ixora. This one's referred to as Maui yellow. There's also a brilliant red and an orange one as well. Very beautiful. Similar flower to the penthus, the new series released as a Texas superstar plant, the Lucky Star penthus. So it has that little star-like flowers in a cluster, but the foliage is much more shinier, much more attractive, that tropical look to it. It's a compact plant. Ixoras usually grow about 3 feet tall, about the same width. Heavy feeders, so you do have to fertilize your container plants a little bit more with 2 or 3 different fertilizers once a week throughout the growing season, as mentioned before. But this is a cool, unique plant. Gives you that tropical look. Give you a lot of blooms throughout the summer months, spring and early fall up to the first frost. But again, they are tender, so you gotta protect that container or move it into a protected locale if we have an extreme winter time. Mandevillas, this is Alice DuPont, which has a huge pink flower to it. A few weeks back, we talked about the real series of the Mandevilla, the Diplonidia, the red one. Mandevilla, the Alice DuPont one, as we're seeing here, gets a little bit bigger. So grow it in a big container, very tender, but gives you a lot of color, loves the sun. Put a large enough size container, put a lattice or trellis in the background so it can kind of cling to it. Hummingbirds and butterflies are attracted to those beautiful, large pink flowers. And as a rule of thumb, mandevillas and most other tropical type ornamental plants, vines, or other are heavy feeders. So keep them well watered, mulch these containers as well, and keep them well fertilized so they get you plenty of nice, shiny green leaves, but most important, an abundance of blooms throughout the entire growing season. Another one of my favorites really gives you that tropical look. Very shiny, glossy leaves, very cool flower buds before they open up is Allamanda. And Allamanda is a vine-like plant grown the same as the Alice DuPont Mandevilla, or even similar to the larger Bougainvilleas. It has more vine-like shoots that arise from the crown of the plant, and then these beautiful trumpet-like yellow flowers that the hummingbirds and butterflies adore as well with that tropical look. There are some smaller versions that bloom smaller blooms and much more compact bush-type plants, but I really think the most showiest of the Allamandas is the vine. So you do have to support it again on a trellis, lattice, or an upright structure and tie it to an arbor or something like that. But they're tender as the other ones we just mentioned. So protect them if we have a uniquely hard winter. Or some people, like in Dallas and areas like that, just grow them as annuals and replant them every year, especially when you have as much color and unique color and flowers as we've shown you with Allamanda and a couple others already. Plumerias are getting very popular, particularly in and around water features and on the patio. They do best in a very tight container. They have a kind of a unique bamboo-like woody wood appearance to them, very shiny oleander tropical leaves to them, and then the clusters come out on them. And when you go to Hawaii, that's what they call frangipani plants, plumerias, or Hawaiian lei plants, and that's where they make the necklaces that they give you when you're a visitor over there. So they're fragrant. They grow in an array of different colors on them, but they're very all the tropical like blooming type plants. They're going to be the most cold sensitive. So people will plant them in the landscape in very small containers, kind of heal them in the ground, or even plant them and then dig them out in October, and then strip the leaves and put them dormant in the garage, and then bring them out next spring, or just move the container in and cut back the watering after you strip the leaves. Kind of a dormant plant. They propagate real easy, particularly if you have a friend or with these unique colors on them. Cool plant, different plant, very tropical. They like the sun, so the more sun that you get, the more unique flowers potentially you'll have during the hotter times of the year. But you grow them in very tight containers, clay preferably, and they need that extra moisture and extra fertilizer in order to grow the plants, the leaves, establishment, and get more blooms throughout the major growing season. So that's some of the plants. We covered a few, and I'm sure there's quite a few other plants to consider in your garden and landscape or your patio. But we gave you a few ones to consider. Follow the guidelines, and think you'll have fun with that tropical escape in your landscape for the summer months. But let's get them planted here before mid-June, before it gets too hot and the selection is best for most of these plants that we mentioned today. So I always like to throw a bonus plant in there. Today's bonus plant is our fourth Texas Superstar plant released for 2020. It is a annual in some parts of the state, meaning you have to replant it. In other parts where it's protected or doesn't get as cold, you would grow this as a perennial plant that comes back year in and year out. And the selection is Beach Bum Blue Daze. Been around a long time, and there's other cultivars, but I think Beach Bum Blue is probably the best of the best. Grow it in an area that gets full sun, early morning sun. The more sun, the more blooms. It's a low-growing, cascading ground cover type of a plant in a hanging basket. A plant standalone on the container on the patio that hangs, cascades. Maybe some taller plants in the middle of it. Maybe Coravinca in the middle for the heat, and then let this cascade down. Very reliable plant. And we're in the month of May, so blue for the month of May is very significant to a lot of us. So a cool plant, fourth release for 2020 for Texas Superstar plants. So I think you're really going to like this plant. Maybe cut it back once or twice a year, particularly when it's starting to bloom out. Fertilize it so we can get more blooms throughout the year. And I think you're really going to like this color. Very vibrant blue color for it. And it's a selection of plant that's been around a long time, but this cultivar, particular beach bum blue, has really made it significant to put it out as a Texas Superstar this year as well, particularly in the month of May. So we've covered quite a bit today. Hope you learned a little bit, and I hope you familiarize yourself with our major websites. Aggie Horticulture is the biggest website presence on the Texas A&M University system, since gardening is still this nation's #1 hobby, and in Bexar County and San Antonio, the #1 agriculture commodity, with over 14,000 employees and $1.6 billion to our local economy. Gardening and landscape is very big time. Don't forget our Bexar County Extension Service website, not only for archived information, but information that we put on the homepage for educational opportunities that you can consider attending throughout the year. Dr. Jerry Parsons and Dr. Calvin Finch have a lot of great archived information on plantanswers.com. So hopefully you're utilizing these three websites. A lot of great practical gardening and landscape information on there. Tomorrow is our next part 2 of this series, Pest, with our entomologist, Molly Keck. And she'll cover some of the plants that we covered today, pest potentials, that if you have something out of whack, not enough sun, too much, not enough water, poor fertility on these plants, poor nutrition program, poor sunlight, poor air circulation, plants will get pests, insects, and she'll cover some of that. So hopefully you can join her tomorrow on this Wednesday, May 20th. Gonna be a great presentation, and she always does a good job. Please go to our My Extension 210 channel. My Extension 210 is one word with a capital M, capital E, 210 YouTube channel. We'll have this webinar archived there. So try to subscribe to My Extension YouTube channel for this and all the upcoming ones that we offer throughout the year. And we would really appreciate you supporting us on that by subscribing to it and looking at all the other educational gardening, pests, and other extension archived information we have on that channel. Thank you. I hope you learned a little bit today. David Rodriguez, that's my email address again. And one last final plant is a Texas Superstar. This is the second largest open face flower in the world. Moy Grande Hibiscus. Flare is an awesome hibiscus that we talked about, but maybe adding Moy Grande Hibiscus from Dr. Moy from the San Antonio Botanical Garden in a patio or a standalone planting landscape would also add to those beautiful plants for shade, for sun, for semi-shade, annuals, perennials, evergreen types of that tropical landscape that we want you to have this summer. As always, thank you for joining us today. Remember, learn and have fun, and don't hesitate to send me an email if I can help you with any gardening and landscape questions. And always thank you for supporting Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service.